This video is for people who don't want to make some very specific mistakes early in marriage, or even when they're at a point in their life where they're really defining who they are and what they want. So I'm going to share 3 things that I really wish I had known early in marriage and really in my 20s because I was married pretty young. And I'm going to help you understand what's driving that behavior and what you can do very strategically to change it. Now, before I jump into that, I do want to mention, if you're new here, I'm Ketra Thompson, and I'm a certified master hypnotist and a relational recovery coach. So what I do is I help my clients reframe these old core beliefs that are driving their unwanted behaviors and feelings, and we do that on a subconscious level to create a tremendous amount of traction and growth in your life. So if you'd like to learn more, there's a link down in the description. You can check that out. You can even set up a completely complimentary consultation call so that we can get to the heart of what's going on with you. And as always, I do appreciate it when you click like and subscribe so that you can be notified every time I post a new video. Okay, so a lot of people talk about what they wish they'd known in their 20s. And for me, that's a little bit tricky because I was married really young. I was married at 19, had my first child at 19, had all of my children in my 20s. And so my 20s were not the typical go out and party and find yourself years. But in the same way, I was finding myself, and I was trying to determine who I was, and I was trying to prove myself to the world, really. I mean, I worked really hard. I was married, and we both were starting out with nothing. So we worked hard to build our careers, to build a company, to do all of these things. And I was so concerned with having it all figured out and having my life look the way I thought it should look. I bought my first home when I was 21, bought a duplex, lived in half, we rented out the other half, flipped it, bought another house, remodeled that, sold that, built a home. By the time I was 27, we had moved into the home we had built, a 3,500 square foot home in a gorgeous neighborhood, and by all measurements of success, we had made it. And we had worked really hard to do it, but we had also sacrificed some things that were really important and overlooked some things that should not have been overlooked in the process. So one of the first things that really should have been addressed when I was at that age is the fact that I really needed support. I was doing all of this, trying to be perfect in every way, trying to get the approval of everyone, because there was a subconscious part of me that really thought I had let people down. And I probably had. I didn't finish college initially because I was married, I was pregnant, and I was sick, throwing up all day, and I had to prove myself. I had to work really hard to prove myself and make myself feel like I was worthy of respect. But in the reality of it, I really needed support, and I wasn't aware of how much I needed to reach out for that support. I remember one day when I was probably about 20, probably 21 maybe, I don't know, it doesn't matter. Anyway, I was exhausted. My oldest son did not sleep through the night for 2 years, and we were both just burning the candle at both ends trying to make life work. So I remember looking down at my toenails one day in the bathroom, and I just kind of slumped up against the wall behind me and slid down to the ground and started sobbing because I couldn't remember the last time I'd had time to paint my toenails. I didn't know when I was going to find the time to paint my toenails. I wasn't going to find the time. I was absolutely overwhelmed, exhausted, and drained in every way, emotionally, mentally, physically. But on the outside, it looked like I was functioning pretty well. So it didn't occur to me to reach out and get the support that I needed, to ask for a little more help and support from family and friends. And I had a limited friend network because most of my other friends were now off in university, and here I was with a family. And so I didn't have the support network. I ended up building it a little later, but it was really, really a tough time for me. And I wish I had known that I could do something differently in that regard. The second thing I really wish I had known different is I was really focused on accumulating things. I was focused on making sure that people respected me and knew that I had what it took and that we could be successful and that I could be the best mom ever. And I read all the parenting books, and I was just really consumed with not looking like a failure to myself or to the world around me. And so because of that, my husband and I at the time, we weren't really focused on cultivating the deep connection that we needed. Instead, I was married to a people pleaser, and I just believed with 100% that everything he was telling me and sharing with me was accurate, that he really did want the same things I wanted, that we really were on the same page. And instead of doing that, I wish I had had more curiosity and realization that he was not me. And that the reality of our situation was that while we loved each other, while we chose to be married, we really were very, very different. And had we not been pregnant when I got married, maybe we wouldn't have gotten married. And so there were some fundamental differences about us. And instead, I made these assumptions that we were on the same page. Now, part of that was his fault for not being assertive and communicating clearly. Part of that is my fault for making the assumption that he was much more like me than he really was. And a lot of it boils down to being young and immature and inexperienced and not prepared for those things. But it happens in relationships in later years in life too, where we make the assumption that the other person really wants what we want, almost assuming that they are me, that they have the same thoughts and feelings and perspective and worldview as me. And a lot of people run into this, and it creates this turmoil and these arguments that they don't even know really what's underneath it. But what's underneath it is the assumption that the other person sees things the way that you do, and a real lack of curiosity about learning and finding out how that other person is wired. And the biggest thing that I really wish I'd known is that I didn't need to be what other people expected me to be. I didn't need to be volunteering in every capacity, super mom all over the place, baking for everything that came up. I didn't have to be successful in everyone else's eyes. I didn't have to be perfect. I wish I had known that I didn't have to be who other people said that I would be, or that I should be. I wish that I had known that I could tune into myself, that I could actually notice what's going on with me and be present in the moment and not become the person that the world thought that I needed to be. What I did was, back then I was really involved in my church community, and so my view was that I really should have my husband providing, and I should play this good Christian wife at home. And so when it came to the point where we were financially stable enough for me to quit my job and be home with my second and third son when they were born, it was great. I loved it. I really, really loved that time. But what I really missed out on was I missed out on being honest with myself about what do I want for me, because my kids won't be little forever. What do I want in my life? What kind of work would make me feel satisfied? Because the reality is, in my situation, is it put a burden on my now ex-husband to provide in a way that he thought he should be providing as well, even though we were doing quite well and we were quite successful. It was another one of those moments where I made the assumption that he really wanted what I wanted, and it wasn't necessarily true. So I wish I had had a little more balance in my life, knowing that of course I want to be there for my kids, and of course I want to do these things that are meaningful, but I also don't want to do that at the detriment of myself, or my ability to support myself, or my ability to cultivate growth in a certain area. And so I wish I had known that I didn't need to be what the world told me I should be. And that's a big deal, right? So the reality of this is that our subconscious mind is driving a lot of our behavior. It's driving our beliefs, our emotional triggers, and a lot of times the patterns that we're repeating in the people we're choosing and the way that we're relating to them, because it's all programmed in our subconscious mind. And the majority of that programming happens by the time we're 7 years old. So there's things that affect it after that, of course, especially through complex trauma or big trauma. But much of that has been programmed when we were so young, and it's been running on autopilot for so long that we don't even know that it's there. And so we subconsciously make these choices that repeat some patterns in our life. And for me, I repeated a pattern of choosing someone that was very passive and somewhat people-pleasing. And in the process, it actually was like a betrayal because I didn't really know what the real desires were underneath him because he wasn't sharing them. And it actually led to the end of that marriage in a lot of ways, with a bipolar diagnosis in him and a lot of affairs that happened, which is not uncommon with someone who might go manic with bipolar disorder. And what the reality is underneath that is that the stress of that life and the stress of probably what I was contributing to my expectations of him were not in alignment with what he wanted. And because he couldn't articulate it to me, he ended up acting out in ways that gave him an escape route, because that ended our marriage. And even today, we're still good friends. You know, we were married for 17 years and we sort of grew up together. And we've been able to discuss these things a little bit more in recent years. And I really wish I had known how to communicate better with him. And I wish he had known how to be in his assertiveness and communicate with me so that I would have a better understanding of where we were. We were really not on the same page. So the hypnotherapy process could have helped both of us address what was driving these unwanted behaviors so that we could step into a situation with a lot more clarity and a lot more of really not only knowing who we were, but also knowing how to connect with the other person. But the funny thing about life is that life gives us a lot of opportunities for growth. And even though it can set us up for some failures too, at the end of that marriage, I was really, really devastated, and I was really in a shame spiral, thinking that here I was a person who had been in a leadership position in a church. I had taught marriage classes and parenting classes, and here I was now divorced. The shame was overwhelming, and it led me into a very short but toxic second marriage with someone with very narcissistic tendencies. And even though I saw a tiny little bit of red flags initially, I didn't see the whole picture until after we were married. And so our life experiences can cripple us in a way, causing us to make these decisions in life that really aren't in alignment with who we really are. But at the same time, that experience for me created so much pain that it forced me to grow. It forced me into a position of, I'm either going to keep betraying myself by being in something this terrible, or I'm going to stop betraying myself and I'm going to choose me. And that's what happened. I switched careers. I started over in my 40s with nothing. I have had to do the deep, deep work, years of it, to really get back to my authentic self. And the one thing that helped me in this process so profoundly was the hypnotherapy process, which is why I believe in it so much, which is why I do it, because it's not just learning something new, it's actually feeling different because you're working on a subconscious level. So the things that I would have done differently and how I would have made that shift is that, first of all, I would have asked for more support. I would have asked for more help and support from family and friends as much as I could have in those early years. The second thing is I would have been more curious about communication and not maybe taking every word at face value, but trying to read between the lines, trying to cultivate a really safe environment so that communication would be a lot easier for both of us, that we could have had a calm nervous system when it was happening, that we could have regularly inquired about each other and where we were at and what we were feeling. And that's something you can do in your relationship too, especially once you've addressed those triggers that were making everything not feel calm, those things that are making you feel defensive or argumentative, that are creating distance in your relationship. Once you're able to calm the nervous system and engage in communication that's curious, it's a total game changer. And the third thing I really would do is I would have taken more responsibility to cultivate my own sense of self outside of the influence of other people, without them telling me what it looked like to be a wife and a mother, and wouldn't have let those roles in my life define who I am so entirely. They are definitely a part of my life. They are definitely things that have shaped me. But I would have created more of an identity true to who I was inside, my most authentic self. And I would have put myself at a higher priority for creating success, because I was really taught to rely on my spouse to take care of that success part, to be there, to worry about the retirement, all of these things that I should have been worried about for myself. And maybe worried is the wrong word. Should have been proactive about that for myself. And so these are the steps I would have taken. I would have done the deeper work had I known, so that I could actually have addressed those subconscious beliefs that were repeating these patterns in my life, that were causing me to choose people that weren't the right fit for me, and they were keeping me blind to the part that I was playing in all of that. So I have custom hypnotherapy programs that help people do this, and it's amazing for me to watch their progress every single week as they are just stepping into their authenticity. They're calming their nervous system. They're finally able to communicate accurately, create healthy boundaries, and ultimately create a much, much deeper connection to the people that they love. And trust me when I say that all of this goodness is already inside of you. You already have everything you need to create that level of success in your life. We just need to get rid of the subconscious beliefs that are standing in your way. So if you'd like help with that, again, check out the link in the description below. And until next time, I hope you curate a life by your own design.